Did you know that China graduates roughly 400 fighter pilots a year, while the United States Air Force graduates 1,350? And that does not even count Navy and Marine Corps pilots. Now combine that with the fact that China quietly cut a full year out of its pilot training program in 2024, went from 6 flight academies down to 3, and has not fought a real air war since 1979. Meanwhile, American pilots have been flying actual combat missions in contested airspace for over 3 decades straight. So yes, China built the J-20 Mighty Dragon. Yes, it is a 5th-generation stealth fighter that deserves to be taken seriously. But a jet is only as dangerous as the person flying it. And when you look at what is actually going on inside the cockpits on both sides of this rivalry, the picture looks very different from what the headlines suggest. Today, we're breaking down the real difference between America's fighter pilots and China's best. This includes the training, the experience, the aircraft, and the critical weakness China has been trying to overcome by secretly recruiting retired Western military pilots. This is a story that rarely gets told, but today, I am bringing it out of the shadows. Before we start, here's a question for you. I want you to think about this. If 2 pilots had equal jets, who wins? The pilot with 3,000 hours in a simulator, or the one with 300 hours in actual combat? Drop your answer below. There's no wrong answer yet, but there will be by the end of this video. Part 1. Red flag. The closest thing to a war that isn't. There is a training exercise that American fighter pilots either love or hate, depending on where they are in their career, and it is called Red Flag. It runs multiple times a year out of Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada, and the concept behind it came from one of the most uncomfortable lessons the Air Force ever had to sit with. During the Vietnam War, pilots were dying in their early combat missions at a rate that was hard to accept. The Air Force ran a detailed study called Project Red Baron II, and what it found was clear. If a pilot survived his first 10 combat sorties, his odds of making it through the rest improved dramatically. The problem was getting them through those 10 alive. So in 1975, the Air Force built an answer. They would give every pilot their first 10 combat missions before they ever flew a real one. Red Flag today covers over 12,000 square miles of airspace and involves hundreds of aircraft from the U.S. Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps, and allied nations including the UK, Australia, and Japan. There are aggressor squadrons, some of America's best pilots who spend their entire careers studying how adversary air forces think, fly, and fight so they can replicate those tactics against the pilots coming through. They fly with enemy paint schemes on their aircraft. They use adversary radio procedures. The whole point is that by the time a young American pilot finishes Red Flag, they have faced simulated surface-to-air missiles, electronic jamming, coordinated multi-aircraft attacks, and every trick in the enemy playbook, and they have had to work through all of it under pressure and come out the other side with lessons they carry for the rest of their career. The results speak for themselves. During Red Flag exercises, F-35s recorded a kill ratio of 15-1 against aggressor squadrons flying hard and using everything they had. Brigadier General Novotny, who ran exercises at Nellis, said publicly that the F-22 and F-35 had become so capable that it was genuinely difficult to give their pilots a challenging fight even in training. China has no equivalent of Red Flag. Their pilots train in scripted exercises that are carefully controlled and largely predictable. The chaos, the adaptability, and the experience of having an adversary genuinely try to beat you using every tool available, that is not something the People's Liberation Army Force has built into its culture the way America has. And culture in aviation is not a soft concept. It is the difference between a pilot who freezes at the moment of decision and one who already knows what to do because they have been through something close to it before. The F-22 and F-35 have complicated our job here at Red Flag because their speed, stealth, and sensor fusion capabilities make it difficult for our aggressors to really challenge and push them, said Brigadier General Novotny. But training is only part of what separates these two air forces. The deeper issue here, the one China is so worried about, that they went looking for a shortcut, is something that cannot be manufactured in any simulator or academy. And when you hear the lengths they went to trying to get it, it puts the whole rivalry in a very different light. Part 2, the experience gap, and why China tried to buy its way out of it. The People's Liberation Army Air Force has not been in a real air war since 1979. That is not an insult, it is just a fact. And it matters enormously, because the kind of judgment that gets built in actual combat is something that takes years to develop and cannot be passed down through textbooks. An instructor who has never flown a real combat sortie can teach procedure, can teach doctrine, can teach the mechanics of how to fight. What they cannot teach is what it actually feels like when the situation stops matching the plan and every second counts. American pilots have been flying real missions in contested environments continuously since the Gulf War in 1991. Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, Kosovo, generation after generation of United States Air Force pilots has come home from actual combat operations with hard-won experience that filters back into the training system, back into the curriculum, and back into the culture. The instructors at Red Flag and at the United States Air Force Weapons School are not teaching from manuals alone. They are teaching from things they personally lived through. China recognized this gap, and what they did about it is one of the more remarkable intelligence stories of the last decade. The Five Eyes Alliance, which is the intelligence partnership between the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, and New Zealand, issued formal warnings that Chinese state actors were actively and covertly recruiting retired Western military pilots. Britain specifically warned that former Royal Air Force and Royal Navy pilots were being approached and offered significant sums of money to travel to China and train People Liberation Army Air Force aviators. The goal was straightforward: buy the combat experience that decades of peace had denied them. Several pilots were prosecuted. The recruitment campaign was eventually exposed and shut down in large part. But the fact that it existed at all tells you exactly how seriously Beijing takes this problem. You do not go to those lengths if you believe your training system is already producing what you need. China has the jets, the money, and the political will, and they still felt the need to go looking for something their own system could not give them. This is the gap that specs do not capture. When you read a comparison of the J-20 versus the F-22, and everything is listed in columns including range, payload, radar cross-section, and top speed, none of those columns has a row for what a pilot does when the situation falls apart at Mach 1.5 and they have 3 seconds to make a call that will determine whether they make it back. But that row exists. It just lives in the pilot's head. And American pilots have been filling it in for 30 years. Only our individual efforts and the freedom that lives in our hearts and the teamwork of every man and woman who serves make us who we are, said General Chuck Yeager, who was the first pilot ever to break the sound barrier. Now let's put the pilot question aside for a moment and talk about the aircraft themselves, because the J-20 genuinely is an impressive machine and it deserves an honest look. But when you get into what it actually does compared to what the F-22 and F-35 do, a few things stand out that most comparison videos skip right past. Part 3, F-22 versus J-20, the honest comparison. The J-20 Mighty Dragon is China's most advanced operational fighter. It carries weapons internally, which is critical for maintaining a stealth profile. It has a wide-band active electronically scanned array radar. It has long enough range to be relevant across the Taiwan Strait and into the Western Pacific. These are not small things, and it would be a mistake to wave them off. But there are design choices in the J-20 that analysts have pointed to for years as compromising its stealth in ways the F-22 does not have to deal with. The canard fins at the front of the aircraft, which are the small forward swept surfaces that help with maneuverability, create radar reflection angles that a fully tailless design like the F-22 avoids. The engine inlet geometry is another area where questions have been raised. The honest answer is that nobody outside China's military has precise numbers on the J-20's radar cross-section, but the design tells a story that experienced aeronautical engineers can read. The F-22 Raptor was designed for exactly one mission: to own the sky. Not ground attack, not multi-role flexibility, and not reconnaissance, but absolute air dominance, period. Its radar cross-section from the front is often compared to a marble, meaning it's a tiny metal sphere. For context, a commercial airliner shows up on radar like a building. The F-22 shows up like something you would struggle to find even if you were looking for it. And it does all of this while being able to cruise at supersonic speed without using afterburner. This capability is called supercruise that most fighters in the world cannot match. The F-35 took a different design path. It is built for multi-role flexibility across every branch of the military, but in contested airspace, it has proven itself just as formidable. Those red flag kill ratios of 15-1 were not against pushover opponents. The aggressor squadrons at Nellis are flying hard, using every adversary tactic in the book, and the F-35 still dominates. That is not a training exercise result you dismiss. What the J-20 has never had is a real test. It has never had to face an adversary with comparable sensor fusion and electronic warfare capability in an environment designed specifically to defeat it. The F-22 and F-35 face that environment every year in training, specifically so that if it ever happens for real, there are no surprises. The J-20 pilots are flying serious missions near Taiwan, accumulating experience in high-pressure situations, but those are not the same as being put inside a red flag scenario designed to kill you and having to find a way to win anyway. We are going to fight and win the next war the way we trained for it, and we train harder than anyone in the world, said General David Goldfein, who was the former USAF Chief of Staff now. Here is the part of this story that actually keeps American defense planners focused, because China is not standing still, and the rate at which they are moving is something that demands a serious answer. The question is whether that answer is already being built, and it is. Part 4: China is moving fast, and America is already building what comes next. The J-20 fleet grew from around 50 aircraft in 2020 to over 300 by mid-2025, with production running at roughly 100 to 120 jets per year. China is developing drone wingman technology to fly alongside the J-20 in combat. They are investing heavily in long-range missiles designed to keep American carriers at a distance. They are building the infrastructure of a modern air force at a pace that would have seemed impossible 20 years ago. Anyone who tells you China is not a serious competitor in the air is not paying attention. But here is what America is doing at the same time. The F-47 program, the first sixth-generation fighter contract in history, awarded to Boeing in March 2025, is already moving toward a first flight in 2028. Its combat radius exceeds 1,000 nautical miles, almost double the F-22's 590. Its stealth rating has been officially categorized as Stealth Plus+, above both the F-35 and F-22 on the Air Force's own internal scale. It is designed from the start to command a fleet of AI-controlled drone wingmen, and it will be flown by pilots who came up through Red Flag, who have combat experience in their institutional memory, and who trained in the most demanding aerial warfare environment on Earth. China will narrow the aircraft gap over time. That is inevitable given their investment and industrial capacity. The pilot gap is the harder one to close because it is built on something that takes decades to accumulate and cannot be rushed. The living record of what works and what does not, passed from generation to generation through instructors who were actually there. From the P-51 Mustangs that cleared the skies over Europe in 1944, to the F-86 Sabres that held their own in Korea, to the F-15 Eagles that went 104 kills to 0 losses in the Gulf War, American air power has shown up for every generation of aerial warfare ready, not without hard lessons. Vietnam cost the Air Force dearly and forced a complete rethink of training, which is exactly why Red Flag exists today. But the willingness to look honestly at what went wrong and build a better system is itself part of what makes American aviation culture different. The pilots climbing into F-22s and F-35s today are the product of that culture. And the pilots who will one day climb into F-47s are in training right now, logging hours, getting debriefed, and learning from people who have actually been shot at. That is the advantage that does not show up in any spec sheet, but matters more than almost anything that does. No enemy Air Force has ever competed with the United States Air Force on our terms. Our job is to make sure it stays that way, says an anonymous USAF Weapons School graduate. When people compare the F-22 to the J-20 or American pilots to Chinese pilots, the conversation usually stays on the surface, which means top speed, radar range, stealth, and coatings. Those things matter. But the deeper comparison is about what happens when a pilot is alone in the sky, something goes wrong that was not in the briefing, and they have 3 seconds to make the right call. That moment is built from thousands of hours of training, from instructors who flew the same situation for real, and from a culture that has been pressure testing itself continuously for 80 years. China is working hard to close every gap that exists between their Air Force and America's. They deserve credit for how far they have come and how fast. But right now, the American pilot in that cockpit carries something that no production line and no recruitment campaign can replicate quickly, and that is the gap that matters most when it counts. Drop your take in the comments. Do you think China closes the pilot experience gap before the F-47 enters service? Or does American training culture always find a way to stay ahead? Both sides of that argument have real merit, and I want to hear where you land.